We are returning to The Legend of Heroes, this time around going backwards in time to an earlier game in the franchise, and that is Trails in the Sky. Alongside it, we are going to be baking instead of cooking, and we're going to be making some very iconic maple cookies. Because this is Recipe and Review, a series of videos where I pick a JRPG, review it, and try and make a recipe inspired by or directly pulled from the game. So let's go ahead and go over our ingredients and get started on the description of our title. The Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky is a classic-style Japanese role-playing game, developed by Nihon Falcom. It's the first entry in the Trails subseries of the Legend of Heroes franchise, and it's often praised for its deep world-building, lovable characters, and long-term storytelling that stretches across multiple games. The game takes place in the Kingdom of Laburo, a small but technologically advanced nation known for its use of orbans, magical/technological devices that power everything from combat to daily life. You follow Estelle Bright and her adopted brother Joshua, who begin their journey as junior members of the Bracer Guild, a group dedicated to protecting civilians and solving problems, ranging from lost cats to political conspiracies. For this recipe, we're going to need flour, and lots of it. 2 1/3 cup to get started. Then we're going to need baking soda. We need 1 whole teaspoon of baking soda. We need 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a whole stick of butter, or 1/2 cup if you decide to get very specific. 1 whole cup of dark brown sugar. I recommend the darker brown sugar instead of the light brown sugar because it gives you more of that interesting maple flavor. We'll need exactly 1 egg. We need 1/3 cup of pure maple syrup. Don't use the breakfast stuff, get the pure stuff because that's going to be a better choice. We have 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract and 1 teaspoon of maple extract. And that's going to be it for our ingredients. It's actually going to be pretty simple this time around. Just like the characters of this game. There's not a ton of them this time around compared to a lot of the other games in the franchise, which I actually enjoyed. Estelle and Joshua made for an interesting duo, though Joshua often overshadowed Estelle, to the point where I sometimes forgot she was meant to be the main protagonist. The supporting cast was fun, and as someone who played Cold Steel first, seeing their origins was quite a treat. That said, I wish more of them had been permanent companions. Character growth existed but was limited, and Estelle especially felt much the same at the end as she did at the beginning. Now to start with our recipe, we're going to mix some of our dry ingredients together in a bowl, and we're going to whisk them together. We're going to mix our flour, our salt, and our baking soda. And we're going to whisk. And just like we whisk our ingredients together to make a recipe, we have to whisk our characters together to make a story. So how does the story pan out in Trails of the Sky? Let's talk about that. The narrative structure worked well, keeping a steady flow throughout. It stayed grounded while hinting at deeper layers. And the twist at the end was a great payoff. Themes like coming of age and living in someone else's shadow were present, but they stayed mostly surface level. Once we're satisfied that this is nice and mixed, we're going to go ahead and move on to our other ingredients to mix together. And that is brown sugar and butter. Now, usually, you'd want to use like one of those beating machines, those big mixing machines, but I don't have one of those, so we're going to do this by hand, the old-fashioned way. We're just going to have to make sure we do this until it's all nice and creamy. Once we're satisfied, we'll go ahead and add our egg and mix that in as well. And while I continue to mix, let's go ahead and talk about the gameplay loop. The battle system is a clear prototype for what the series would later perfect. It carries some fun dynamics, but also some frustrations, particularly the difficulty, which often felt punishing unless you died repeatedly to trigger the stat adjustments. If you love old school challenge, it's perfect. I personally found it grating. Exploration was fun, but the lack of fast travel and dungeon maps left me annoyed. But on the bright side, the pacing was fantastic. Side quests were easy to engage with or ignore, and combat encounters came at the right times. One of the tricks to doing this, if you're doing it by hand, is making sure that all of the clumps of butter are no longer clumps. You want it to be nice and smooth all the way through. And if you have to get ingrained with your fingers, just grab some gloves and do so. And once again, once the egg has been mixed in thoroughly, we'll go ahead and add the other wet ingredients, including the vanilla extract, the maple extract, and lastly, our maple syrup. And then we'll mix again. Lots of mixing this time around. Lastly, in the mixing front, we'll go ahead and add our dry ingredients to our wet ingredients. And once again, in case you haven't guessed it, we'll mix. The consistency we're looking for with this mixture is just nice and doughy, like your classic cookie dough. Getting the hand crampies. Now that we've got this mixed into a nice doughy consistency, gotta go ahead and chill this for 2 hours because it's not quite ready to put in the oven yet. We need to make sure it has a nice solid texture before we do that. So we're gonna go ahead and put some saran wrap over the top of this and throw it in the fridge. While that starts to chill out, let's go ahead and talk about the art and music of this game. The retro visuals actually stood out as a strength. Aged, yes, but with a nostalgic appeal that made it charming. And the soundtrack, a highlight. Falcom poured their heart into this music, which elevated both environmental and emotional beats. The strongest moments often came when entering a new area, with visuals and music working hand in hand. So now that our dough's had time to chill out, we're gonna go ahead and do one last step, and then we can come together and get our final thoughts on the game. So all we have to do is preheat the oven to 350, and then we're gonna create little balls of dough, smack them on a pan, probably with parchment paper would be a good idea, or something non-stick. And then just let it bake for about 12 to 15 minutes until it's nice and crispy on the edges and soft on the middle. Looks like they're done, so we're gonna go ahead and just take these out of the oven. Set them up, and we will let them cool off for about 5 minutes. And then once they're nice and cooled off, we'll give them a final taste test and talk about the final thoughts of our review. All right, we've waited long enough. It's time to give these a try. They're really good. So what are our final thoughts about the game? The game left me with a good feeling overall. It wasn't earth-shattering, but the ending, especially the last scene in the sequel trailer, stuck with me. By the time the credits rolled, I felt satisfied, curious for more, and glad to finally experience the roots of the Trails series. I'm giving Trails in the Sky a 7.5 out of 10. Now that's it for this video. If you like the recipe or if you like the game, go ahead and let me know in the comments. Hit like while you're at it and subscribe if you would, and I'll see you in the next one.